How was everyone? Lively. My name's Tim Hutchinson. First things first, I do not work for the VA. A lot of times people think you're a veteran service officer. You know, someone might call me on the phone and just read me the riot act, how we somehow stopped his money, and I said, whoa, got to stop and time out. I do not work for the VA at all. I work for the County of Broomfield, city and county, and basically all the county service officers in the state are very similar to your veteran service organization service officers in the capacity of what we do. We help with the claims process. We help dealing with the VA. We try and see if there's a benefit that you might have that we can help you to help you get. So first things first, I am not with the VA. Okay, so CVSO. So this kind of explains it. The veterans, the VA allows for a representative called a VSO to help facilitate with the paperwork when you're doing a claim. So we advocate on your behalf. Like I said, the AMVETS, the VFW, the American Legion, DAV, Military Order of the Purple Heart, they all have veteran service officers. Most of those are down at the VA regional office. So I'm right here in Broomfield. So, you know, you could either go down there and work with one of them or work with us. And the county veteran service officers were actually under the state of Colorado. The Colorado Department of Military Veterans Affairs. We work with them. They are the ones that go down to the regional office. So they review what we do, and then they submit it to the VA. So it's kind of a nice way to have things double checked and make sure that we're on the right track with some of these claims. Nope. Go back there. So, how I can help? Well, you have to sign what's called a Form 2122, which allows us to be your service representative, your service organization. Or any of the other service officers. We can assist you in filing the claim or in the development of the claim, in the gathering of the evidence. We can assist you, guide you on gathering the evidence you need. Service record requests. If you don't have your service record, if you need part of that to prove your claim, we can put in, show you, help put in for your service records, your official military personnel file, your service medical records, all that, which is usually held in St. Louis. Correction of the DD-214. A lot of times guys get out, people get out, and they're given a medal after they've gotten out. And they've been awarded the medal, but they've already been discharged, so it's not on their DD-214. So you have to put in for a correction of that to make sure that it reflects, and they would issue a DD-215, which is a correction to your military record. And also in the issuance of medals. Some people got out, it's on their DD-214, they were supposed to get all these, they never received them. So we can request that you get those as well. Those processes take a little while. It's not something that they do right away. You have to put in the request. Sometimes you have to, follow up with them, give them more information, but eventually they'll, hopefully they'll come around and get that done. Or just to get a copy of your DD-214. If someone doesn't have their separation paperwork, I highly suggest they file for it. Any of the benefits you're ever, going to be entitled to, or even just for family history, even the service record for family history. Like I said, the service record, I was able to get my entire service jacket for my relative ancestor that was in the Civil War. So they can do some digging and they can come up with some records. It just takes a little bit of time. And what's going on there? So I'm just going to put all these up because animations were supposed to be shut off. All right. So we're going to explain the life cycle of a claim, some of the different types of claim. This is just going to be an overview of all the different stuff that we do. Disability compensation. What is a service-connected disability? What is a non-service-connected pension? And some burial benefits. and also survivor benefits. And then as we get to a topic, we can, if you have a question and you don't think you can, or going to remember it later, feel free to ask it, and we'll see if we can't get to it right away. So the Department of Veterans Affairs is broken down into the Benefits Administration, the Health Administration, and the Cemetery Administration. They each have a different function. So when you're putting in for a claim, you're not really dealing with the Health Administration. And sometimes getting those two to talk to each other is a little bit of a chore. So even though you would think that they would easily be able to look at your health care file, and you know, sometimes it takes a little paperwork to get all that done so that they can have everything they need for a claim. And then of course Cemetery Administration, you know, they deal with, there's presidential memorial certificates, the national and state cemeteries, support, you know, they support the state veteran cemeteries, and then also headstones and markers all come through that part of the administration. All right, now the claims process. You get a receipt and review an application. So this is what the VA does. When they get an application, they receive it and they review it. You want to try and make sure you have all the evidence up front for your claim. That way it goes a lot faster. The fully developed claim program was introduced so that they could actually do these things faster. The VA has been known for not being very diligent as far as time frames. They've done a much better job. They're beginning to be a lot faster in the claims process. So they receive and review the application. They have a duty to provide assistance to you. So they will send you a notice if they need a piece of information. They have to send you a notice and say, hey, look, here's what we need, and they'll give you a checklist of everything they need in order to make a determination on your claim. And then they'll schedule an examination if it's a disability exam. If there's going to be one necessary, they'll schedule that. They'll gather their own evidence if they have to go to, like I said, to the healthcare portion and find out you've been seen for certain things. They'll look at that. Then they'll use all the evidence of record and they'll prepare a decision. And then once they have their decision, they're going to turn around and they're going to prepare either a award of benefits or a disallowance or a denial document saying that you are not entitled to benefits, and here's why. They will give you specific reasons why they're denying you. And they notify you through mail. If you're using, they do have e-benefits where you can do a lot of this stuff electronically, but they will still notify you via mail so that you have a decision. If you don't have anything, if you don't receive any correspondence from them, then obviously that's something to check up on and say, well, I haven't received anything. So at each one of these stages, when they're reviewing their application, they should send you a letter saying, we have it, we're looking at it, we're making a determination, we'll get back with you. These processes, time frames every case is different, so the time frames are always going to be different for each case. Everything's individual. So that's how they look at it. When you receive your rating decision, then they're going to tell you how much your compensation, what percentage of compensation and what your level of payment will be. Or on your denial, once you are denied, even if you're only denied for one issue, you put in for 5 issues, they denied you on 1. If they denied you on all of them or one of them, you could put in a notice of disagreement, and you have a year from the date of the denial letter to put in that notice of disagreement. So once you put in the notice of disagreement, the nod, you are still able to submit more evidence in support of that claim, in support of that denial. So if you have to go out and get some more evidence to put in for that, you can do that up until the point where that it's in the a substantial appeal process, and you can still put evidence even when you go to a hearing, video conference. Up to that point, you can still submit evidence. So you'll receive, after the nod process, though, before the appeal, you'll receive a statement of the case. They're going to outline the law and the rules of why you're being denied. by law, they have to tell you why. So they will give you line by line each item why you're being denied, okay? And then if you still don't agree with it, then you can initiate the substantive appeal process, and then that's where the time frame grows. Could be a couple years, could be 5 years. I mean, it's just the time frame for the appeal process is where where it gets very long time waiting periods. But if you have a service officer representing you, like myself or any of the other county service officers, when it comes time to that point, the Colorado Department of Military Veterans Affairs will be there to represent you at the video conference. You're not there by yourself. Someone is there with you, representing you with the video conference with the judge on the appeal process. So that's something to keep in mind, because if you do it yourself, the appeal process, if you want to do this all yourself, you can. However, when it comes to that point, you're going to have to be by yourself, because once you file the notice of disagreement, most service officers will no longer take your case because they had nothing to do with the filing of the original claim. So they're kind of out of the loop at that point, and you're pretty much on your own. So that's something to remember. Even if you're to that point where you're going to file the nod, it's good to sit down with a service officer before you file it and see if they will represent you from that point on. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Service-connected compensation, it's paid for a disability resulting from disease or injury incurred or aggravated while on active service. And the disability does not have to be combat or wartime related. Twisted your knee playing basketball while you're on active duty, got in a motorcycle accident, all these things are still subject to claims. The claims process, because you were on active duty. The VA understands that there is no workman's compensation when you're on active duty. There's this is that program, basically. So, while you're on duty, something happens. If there's a record of it in service, it might not manifest itself till years later, okay, which brings the three things that you have to have for a disability claim. You have to have a diagnosis of a current disability. That has to be in writing, a diagnosis of any disability. You have to have an event or injury in service. And you have to have a connection between those two things. Those are the three things you must have for any disability claim. Must-haves. Now, on presumptive issues, Agent Orange, other things like that, that is the connection between the two. So that takes care of the connection because it's presumptive that you were exposed to these things. But examples, torn knee ligament, hearing loss, back condition, PTSD, including the result of sexual trauma, MST, military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injury, or different skin conditions. If there is record of it that you went to be seen in the military for it somewhere, it's a good claim. It's when there's an absence of it, that's when they come back and deny it a lot of times, say there was absence of any complaints in the military for any of these conditions. So a lot of times guys get denied because it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. Okay? And that's the key issue that a lot of people forget about. So there's an acute disabilities, which are short duration and they clear without residuals. A lot of times, these acute disabilities, you might be seen for something in the military. If it's resolved itself and there is no current disability, then there is no claim. Chronic disabilities, right? Long term, they don't go away. Hypertension, arthritis, migraines. If you're seen for any of those conditions while you're in, or you had an event that may have led to those conditions, then you can definitely put in for those. And a lot of times, in lieu of documentation, you can go back and talk to, say, if you have some buddies that you served with that you go to reunions with, right? And you ask them, remember this time this happened? Oh, well, yeah, of course I do. If they write a statement out, sworn, notarized statement, that's admissible. Buddy statements, they call them, lay statements, are admissible in the absence of other evidence. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, and the disability compensation portion. So if you are awarded a disability compensation, it's tax-free monetary benefit, paid for a service-connected disability, and the service-connected disability is resulting from the injury, illness, or disease that was incurred or aggravated while on active duty. So, aggravation. Say you had a bad knee, you went in, they were drafting you, and they said, well, it's good enough to go in. And you go in, and you hurt it. You hurt it some more. That is aggravating it, and it is susceptible to claims. You can file a claim on that. So it is important to understand the distinction of any condition, even though you already had it, if it was aggravated. I went in and I had allergies, and then they got much worse while I was in. They were aggravated, or it became asthma. Well, it became aggravated. So those are all good claims. You can put in for service connection for aggravated. You have to be discharged other than dishonorable conditions. That is one of the things that is important. It can't be dishonorable. There are a lot of stipulations as far as service goes for the claims, but we're not going to get into all those because they're different for different time periods. And then compensation is paid from 10% to 100%. Some people might know that, if you get hearing loss, a lot of times it's 0%. Even though you have hearing loss, 0%, non-compensable. So they're saying your hearing isn't as bad to the threshold that the VA is willing to pay, because they're going to give you a hearing aid to help fix that hearing. So it's non-compensable. It has to be very bad before they'll compensate you for it. Ringing of the ears, tinnitus, 10%, that's it, max and automatically 10%. And so that's another rating. Any of the other ratings, there's all different rating schedules for all different conditions. That's all going to depend on what the condition is. And they may be eligible for additional compensation if they're very seriously disabled, if you have qualified dependents, or have a seriously disabled spouse. Those are all monies in addition to, depending on the type of claim it is. So there's a lot to these, but that's the disability portion. So service connection, how do you get that service connection? Okay, a direct service connection, all right? That direct service connection is, okay, I hurt myself while I was in. There's, any number of different ways. Like I said, it does not have to be related to an act of war. It could be a lot of different things, that you're training exercises, anything. Or the aggravation that we discussed of a pre-service disability. So like I said, if they gave you a waiver and you came in and you hurt it more, that aggravation is definitely, presumptively, any boots on the ground in Vietnam are all presumptive to have been exposed to Agent Orange. Okay? So that's the presumptive one. So there's a whole host of issues that if you get, and you were boots on the ground in Vietnam, you could put in a claim for any one of those conditions, and it's presumed, and as long as you could prove boots on the ground, Blue Water Navy right now is excluded, but there is still a bill in Congress. They're trying to get that passed. That Blue Water Navy, they have the same rate of the disabilities as boots on the ground in Vietnam. Same rate of the cancers, same rate of all of it. And so it's important to note that an Australian study said that they felt that the water treatment system was a viable source of exposure in the Navy, and the Australian Navy is compensating their blue water sailors. U.S. isn't yet. So that's the thing. If you're into the legislative, get on your congressman about that one. There is no time limit. Oh, and the secondary service connected condition. If I have, if you have diabetes type 2, that is related to Agent Orange. Well, because of diabetes, you're starting now to get peripheral neuropathy. That's a secondary condition, separately rateable. And there's other conditions too that are separately rateable. So no time limit. You can do it at pre-discharge. Sometimes on bases, they get them started right away. Post-discharge, if you file your claim within a year from discharge, then they'll pay right up to the time that you got out. And then after 1 year, then generally the rule is they're going to pay you from when you filed the claim. And I say generally because there are exceptions to that. But You try and establish that service connection first, and then you could fight them on getting that earlier effective date and see if that, you can get them to change it. And sometimes they will, because there has been precedent. Let's see, original claims, okay? The standard claim process. That's the old process where you sign some releases, they try and dig up, they send your doctor letters, they try and get all this evidence, takes forever. Fully developed claim, you gather all the evidence, put it in a nice, neat package, submit it, and they're getting decisions back, I'd say within sometimes 90 days, they're getting decisions back on those. Those fully developed claims, they go through them, it's a lot easier, a lot faster, and that's the process they're really moving to.
Tim, is that something you can help the veterans?
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the things I always discuss is doing the fully developed claim process. It's faster, it's a much better process, and a lot less headaches in the long run. You're going to deal with a lot less headaches if you have all your ducks in a row when you hand that in. So yes, that's one of the things that I do, is I help you gather whatever evidence you can that's going to help substantiate your claim. I guide you, you're going to have to do the legwork, go to your doctor, make a phone call and all that, but I guide you on what you need and what you're going to have to do. And then we put it in a nice, neat package and send it off. Intent to file. Here's another change that the VA did. You used to be able to write on a just piece of paper that said, I wish to file a service-connected disability claim, Social Security number, your dates of service, send it to the VA, and they would take that as a note that you want to file a claim. They did away with that. Now they have a standard form, okay? A lot of people are arguing that they shouldn't have did that. They're trying to get them to overturn that because some people don't have the means to get the form, to download it from the internet, or to be able to go to a regional office to get them. They want them to change that to being able to just take a piece of paper when someone says they're going to, file a claim. But however, for now, that 210966 is an intent to file a claim. When you put that in, that's telling the VA we're going to file a claim, and you have 365 days from the date of that piece of paperwork getting to the VA to get your fully developed claim in. You got an entire year. Now, that being said, they will pay you retroactively if you have some money coming back to when you filed that claim. So that gives you time to get your fully developed claim together, put it in, and then by the time they make a decision, if they're going to pay your compensation, they're going to go back to the date, the month after the date that you filed that claim. So if we file in February, you're getting paid March 1st.
A quick question, Tim, on the secondary condition rating, like you gave the example of neuropathy.
Right.
Is that added to the primary condition rating, or how does that get worked?
It's a separate rating, so you're going to get, say if you have 20% for the primary condition, and they give you 10% for the next, well, a lot of times, that doesn't equal 30%. We'll just say VA math's a little different, but it will be separately rated. So that condition is a totally different, separately ratable, because there is such thing as pyramiding. If you fall and hurt your shoulder or something happens in the service, you take shrapnel in the shoulder, you got all these issues with your shoulder, they're only going to give it one rating for that condition. But now because of this shoulder, I have to use this shoulder for everything. And it wore out. And I got all kinds of conditions with this. Now I got a secondary condition due to overuse of this shoulder. So it's related to it's secondary to my service-connected disability. Does that answer?
But it doesn't always add up exactly.
Well, as far as the percentages go, yeah, the VA math's a little different. Whenever they give you a percentage, say 20%, then they look at the other 80% of the body, and they consider that whole, 100% again. So then they start dissecting it like that. Even if you're 90%, the 10% left is 100%. So then they're going to say, okay, 10% of 100, and so that's how the VA math works. It's a little tricky, but they do have a chart that you go off that clarifies a little better. Okay. Non-service connected pensions. Okay. These are needs-based, right? Benefit paid to wartime veterans. That's the key. There's certain dates you must have served in order to get this pension. Not all veterans are eligible for it. Who are permanently and totally disabled or over 65. The disability must not be due to own willful misconduct and not be related, and not be related to service. Need not, yes, thank you. Need not. And who is eligible? Discharged from the service under conditions other than dishonorable and served at least 90 days of active duty and at least 1 day during wartime. And, now that doesn't mean you had to be in the war, that's just 1 day during. And countable family income is below a yearly limit set by law, and permanently and totally disabled or 65 or older. So all those things, and instead of permanently and totally disabled, if you're 65 or older, that they consider that permanently and totally disabled. Just saying. It is means tested, so it is needs based, and this is what gets a lot of people. And this is where this is very important benefit, because net worth and countable income change depending on situations. Medical situation, for example, can take out a lot of money out of your pocket all of a sudden, even though you didn't qualify for it. All of a sudden, my monthly income, I'm paying towards nursing care. So nurses coming into the house because I no longer can do the activities of daily living. So if that's the case, the certain money you spend for medical conditions or paid out having to do with medical will offset that countable income. So it's important to know that this can be applied for if you were denied one time. Next year conditions change, you could apply for it again. So this is one that, as you need it, it may become, it may not need it now, but you may need it some other time. So it's important to understand that the non-service connected pension is definitely needs-based, but your needs can change, and so this may be something that a lot of people use. And this is one that I see people in Broomfield that we work on a lot for elderly veterans that are in or about to go into a nursing home, or they are in an assisted living facility, or they have help nursing care that comes to the house. Yes, absolutely.
I was applying a while ago for some assistance like that for my mother, and I ran across several of these kind of investor group type people who are saying if you purchased an annuity or a certain type of annuity, it wouldn't count against your net worth.
As far as the...
That was kind of illegal to try and hide wealth.
It is there is one type that isn't counted, and that is a irrevocable trust, I believe it is. If the money is in an irrevocable trust, then that is not counted. So that's something, something to note. And as of right now, the VA does not have a look back like Medicaid does right now. They're trying to pass it where they're going to try and do a 3 to 5 year look back, but that hasn't been passed yet. So a lot of times people advise them to do these things, right? As far as that goes, I know that those aren't counted, but I never advise anyone on those types of issues because that's outside of my scope. But sometimes it helps to talk to a lawyer on some of these things, especially if you have a lawyer because of the family, family wealth or whatever. It's important to note that those are not counted. So that is the one thing that isn't counted. But still, $80,000 net worth as opposed to Medicaid's $2,000. So if you all of a sudden someone you find that has to go to a nursing home and there is some considerable assets, putting in for this benefit will stretch that money anyway. It won't pay the whole cost because you're only going to get, depending on the what it is, maybe up to $1,500, $1,700 a month max. And nursing home care is expensive, so it will just offset some of the cost. It's not like Medicaid where they're going to pay the whole cost. Medicaid though, a lot of times when you apply for Medicaid, they're going to ask if you've applied for this, because Medicaid is payer of last resort. So they want to know if you're qualified for this, so they do ask you to put in for it. Yes?
Okay, it says other than your residence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're going into a nursing home and you sell your residence, your property,
Once you sell the property,
then it becomes part of the 80.
it does. Once you sell the property, if the other spouse is still living there, then that's fine. If I believe if there's a relative living there that's lived there for over a year, then that might be fine as well. Don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure that's the rule. These things change so much. But yes, if you sell the house, then it becomes a countable asset. The money does.
And they can rescind this at any time if you sell it.
Well, whenever your assets change, you have to send them notice. And when you do, then they're going to say, okay, you don't qualify. And then once the money is back down, you can reapply again. But that keeps you from getting what we call an overpay condition, where they overpaid you, and now they're coming back to get that money. Because what they do is they'll wait and they talk to the IRS and say, wait a minute, this is last year's money, and they start looking at stuff like that, and then they're going to come back and say, wait a minute, we're stopping it because here's why. And then you have to explain to them what happened. So anytime you have a major change in net worth or assets on hand or monthly income, you could let them, you need to let them know. So even some people have used reverse mortgages and taken out just the amount they need to cover the nursing home care or in-home care, depending on what the case is. And so you have to report that as monthly income. But if that draw still keeps you underneath that cap where you're going to be able to, get the benefit, then you're still in good shape. Any other questions on that one? This one's a lot of times, this is the one that people want to know about. So the pension, okay, the maximum allowable pension rates. This shows you it's needs-based. There's not a lot of money there. So if you're a veteran with no dependents, if you make over $12,868 a year, you do not qualify, which is not a lot of money. Absolutely, all sources of income. Now, if you have a spouse or a child, it goes up to $16,000. If you're housebound with no dependents, $15,000. If you're housebound with one dependent, $19,000, okay? But when it goes to aid and attendance, so if you need aid and attendance, which means your doctor says you need help with activities of daily living, and you can provide that doctor's note with that, then it jumps up, if you have a dependent, all the way up to $25,448 a year. So, I've seen a lot of times when people go into nursing homes that their monthly income, they are upside down. So they end up getting the full amount, $25,448 divided by 12. That's your monthly benefit. Now, if you for that aid and attendance portion, okay, if you say you make $20,000, well then they're going to take the difference. After all your deductions, your income's $20,000 a year. They're going to take the $5,448, they're going to divide it by 12, and that's going to be your monthly benefit. Okay? So the further you go down, say $10,000 a year, then they're going to take $15,448, divide it by 12, and that'll be your monthly benefit. So it's needs based on this. A lot of people aren't eligible for it until they have substantial medical expenses. Okay? And then to be deducted, your medical expenses must exceed 5% of the maximum allowable pension rate for 643 or 842, depending on if you're a veteran with dependents or no dependents. So this one gets tricky, and those rates haven't changed yet that I'm aware of. I haven't got a new notice, but if they do change, they won't be that much, I'll guarantee you. Any questions on that one? Okay, so with the aid and attendance portion, okay, veterans, there is no such thing. People say, well, I need aid and attendance for my mother. Well, it's pension with aid and attendance. You have to qualify for the pension in order to get the aid and attendance portion of it. They go hand in hand. There is no just aid and attendance. it's a pension with aid and attendance. So, and it's paid in addition to the monthly pension, and it's not paid without any eligibility to the pension. So you have to be eligible for the pension, and you have to get that. So that's a lot of things people get confused on as well. Burial benefits.
Well, quick question.
Yes.
Would that then make sense to go ahead and apply for a pension, even if you don't think you necessarily are going to qualify, so they at least gone through that process, open to file, notify them if there's a change?
I would say no, only because I would say no is you're not going to qualify, so you're gumming up the system a little bit. So I would wait until I'm qualified, because opening a file, you're going to have to submit everything over again. You got to start from scratch. So nothing that you've really put in for, because everything's going to change. It's all the numbers. It's all the finances. So all the financial statements as far as monthly income, assets, all that stuff. They won't look back at anything. You're going to have to provide a fully developed claim all over again. So to me, you can put in for it if you want, if you're not qualified for it, but it's kind of a waste of time. If you're not qualified, they're not giving it to you, plain and simple. And so we want to make sure that we help you do claims that are viable, that are legitimate. Guys come to me sometimes, I got to tell them, I'm sorry, I don't see a claim here. You don't have a claim. We can file it if you want. That's your prerogative, but I don't see where this is a legitimate claim. So, and then unless you tell them, then I tell them, here's what you're going to need to make this legitimate. You're going to need some, this, and this. But as far as that goes, the pension portion of it, I wouldn't put in, it's your prerogative, you can, but I wouldn't suggest someone does, because if you're gonna qualify for it, you might need it. If you put in for it, you can't put in for it for another year. What if your circumstance changed in 6 months? Well, now you're pushing everything way back. Now it's going to, because the VA, when you start changing it up, it kicks it out of fully developed claim. Whenever you submit extra evidence, you're kicked out of the fully developed claim pile. So unless they ask for it, when you start submitting changes, they kick it out, and now you're stretching out everything. So it's better to file when you need it, and when it's going to be hopefully a good claim. Yes.
With respect to a disability claim, how does this pension thing compare?
You get one, they'll pay you the better benefit.
No. With respect to the time cycle,
It's all going to depend. Pension claims will take 90 days to 6 months. Disability claims can be, like I said, I've seen them come back in 90 days, 6 months. It's going to depend on how many issues you have. So it's tough to compare the two. I would say that they're getting a lot better with the pension claims. I will say that. They are coming back a lot faster than they used to. So I would say that it's tough to compare the two. Disability claims are always way different, just because there's the number of issues involved possibly, and you got to go get a physical exam, a VA exam a lot of times. So that is another part of the process where when they schedule you out, it takes a while. So, yep, so it's tough to compare the two. Burial benefits, okay? National Cemetery. There's a number to call. Whenever you want to schedule, you call right to the National Cemetery hotline, and they'll schedule you for schedule for burying. The State Veteran Cemetery here in Colorado is in Grand Junction. Same thing. You call up, and they'll make arrangements of when they can do it. Headstones, markers, and medallions. Okay. If you don't have a headstone, you can get one. VA will provide it. If you have a headstone, you can get markers or medallions for the headstones, or for the if it's in a mausoleum or the different crypts, different types of things. There's different types of markers and medallions for that. Those are all done via. I can do that in my office. Those are all done paperwork. Sometimes if you're dealing with you buy a plot or you're dealing with a funeral director, they can help with that paperwork as well. But there is paperwork involved with that one.
But you pay for the coffin and all that stuff yourself, or?
Yes, and then there's a reimbursement on certain costs up to a certain amount. And I don't know if I have that slided. I didn't get that deep into it. I might have it on the next one. But there are certain amount that they'll reimburse depending on, so you pay for the coffin or the plot and all this, and they'll allow a certain amount of money to be reimbursed to you. But as far as the headstone, the markers, or medallions, they'll do that.
That's the kind of help you could be to a.
Absolutely, sure. Yeah, I do the paperwork for the reimbursements. So if there's, you bring in the receipts, we file the reimbursements, they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, here's what you're getting back from that. And usually I'm sure you pay a lot more than they're going to give you, so you usually get the maximum amount back. Flags. A lot of people don't know burial flags are actually issued by the post office. Funeral directors usually take care of that. If there is no funeral director, sometimes people don't use a funeral director, then we could submit a paperwork to get that. That's where the DD-214, for any of this stuff, you better have a DD-214 or separation paperwork if it was prior to the DD-214. Got to have that stuff. The military honors. A lot of people ask about the military honors. Funeral directors, and I don't even have the number to this, but funeral directors have a phone number that they can call to get that. So if you're dealing with a funeral director, they can call directly. If you're not, I'm not sure how to get a hold of them, because everywhere I've looked it says funeral director hotline. They don't give a number to it. So funeral directors can get the military honors. They can make a phone call and get that. Other than that, there's no paperwork. There's nothing. Even the little handbook I got says, funeral director hotline right in it. So that's something that they do. And then the DIC claim. If a veteran's death is service connected, then the dependency indemnity claim comes into play. Do they have to have been service connected prior to death? No. If you can prove that they died from a presumptive or a service-connected condition, then you could still put in a DIC claim, even though they were not service-connected prior to death. So that's an important one a lot of people don't know. And then if they are service-connected, then there's the Dependents Educational Assistance, Chapter 35 benefits. And, those are something that we'd have to really dive into. The educational benefits are a whole thing upon themselves. And then also service-connected, there's also CHAMP VA, which is healthcare benefit, which also is part of the, if someone passes away from service-connected issues, that the family is entitled to those CHAMP VA benefits as well. Yes?
My husband is in Fort Worth.
Okay.
And then is it true that I get to be buried with him when my time comes?
I believe that is correct.
And they pay for the new headstone. He's on one side and I'm on the other.
Well, I think they just put your name on the back of the one that's there, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
I believe that's the case.
But then, how would Susan apply? I mean, her.
That phone number. That phone number right there.
Oh, the same one?
Mm-hmm. Because you have to do that through the National Cemetery, because that's where he's buried. Okay. Let's see. We're almost there. Oh, here's the burial costs. Okay, here's burial cost reimbursement. If it's service-related, maximum service-connected burial allowance, $2,000. If the veteran is buried in a VA National Cemetery, the VA may reimburse some or all of the costs transferring the deceased veteran's remains. So if he's buried in the cemetery and there was a cost associated with getting the remains there that you paid, you can put in for a reimbursement of those transportation costs. If it's non-service related, then the VA will pay $300 burial allowance and $745 for a plot. And I believe these numbers are still accurate, but hope they're still accurate. They've been changing a lot of stuff lately. So if the veteran was hospitalized by the VA when he or she died, the VA will pay a $745 burial allowance and a $745 for a plot. So those are the burial reimbursement benefits.
But that is if you're not buried in a national cemetery?
Yes. Yes, if you're not buried in the national cemetery, then you're eligible for all those reimbursements, the markers, the headstone, and all that, yeah. And a headstone, obviously, you're going to get one provided if you're in the national cemetery. And then if you are also in the national cemetery, then you're going to look for reimbursement just for if there were any transportation costs to get them there.
But if you wanted a standard headstone,
Mhm.
like in the cemetery,
Mhm.
in your private plot, can you apply for that too?
Well, you would pay for that out of your pocket, then you would apply for the reimbursement, then you would apply, that's what the medallions and the markers are, to put on those privately purchased headstones. So they do have the medallions and the markers that go right on those, that show the service branch, and there's different types. And actually the website has pictures of all those. Now the survivor's pension is very similar to the veterans non-service connected pension. So it's also needs-based, right? So it's the low-income, unmarried surviving spouse and or unmarried children of a deceased veteran with wartime service. And if you thought the other rates were low, $8,630. If you make more than that, you do not qualify. Unless, obviously, you move down to where you need aid and attendance, and it goes up a bit, but it's nowhere near the $25,000 cutoff for the veteran. So this benefit is a tough one. It's definitely needs-based. It's definitely for low income. But when these surviving spouses end up going to a nursing home, and then most of their income is paying, then they could, if they still have sizable assets where they don't qualify for say they have $70,000 in assets, they're not going to be able to get Medicaid. They're going to not be able to be eligible because of the assets. So this will stretch the money out longer until they get down to that, they're going to spend their money because they're not going to get that much, but it will help stretch the money a little bit until they apply for Medicaid, at which time when Medicaid pays, this converts to a $90 a month, same thing with the veterans, it converts to a $90 a month personal needs money that cannot be touched for any other purpose. So they can't take that money from you, and say, the nursing home take it. No, that's personal needs, and that goes to you every month. They can't touch it. So if they're in the nursing home, they got those $90 a month that they use for personal needs. They just can't let that grow to that $2,000 limit.
Do you see often people below the threshold for office?
When it's usually the daughter or son of an elderly person that has just been put into a nursing home or is about to go into a nursing home, and they come in because now they reach those because it's costing them $4,500 a month, and they're only bringing in $2,000 a month. So they're upside down. So they got to figure out a way. Now they're dipping into their personal assets in order to to offset that cost. So rather than dipping into the assets, this helps them preserve some of the assets. So yes, I do see it, but usually because of medical necessity, that it offsets that countable income, and that's when this need really becomes great. So that's usually when you see it. So that's the survivor's pension. So there is a benefit there. And then the dependency indemnity compensation. It's a monthly benefit paid to eligible survivors. Military service member died while on active duty, or death resulted from service-related injury or disease, or veteran's death resulted from non-service-related injury or disease, and who was receiving or was entitled to receive VA compensation for service-connected disability that was rated as totally disabling. So, that's the thing is for the DIC claims, and that might be something that they don't have to have been service connected at the time, but you have to prove that it was, if someone was passed away from a service connected issue that was presumptive, now you could definitely make the argument that it would have been totally disabling at that point, right? So there is some leeway there as far as trying to argue that. And there is some other stipulations there, but I know they did, I probably didn't put it there, but there is some, like I said, if they're not service connected prior to death, but they could have been, so there's always a chance that you get that benefit, so it's worth definitely exploring. Long-term care, here's another one a lot of people talk about, okay? Say there's a surviving spouse, her husband passed away, or her husband is 70% disabled, and he's going over to a nursing home, now she needs nursing home care. Is she entitled to it? Well, no. I mean, you can go to a facility, they will take at the Fitzsimmons, they will take Gold Star mothers and spouses, but you're going to pay the current rate of $10,500 a month, either private pay or out of pocket, right? Out of pocket private pay, or if you have long-term care insurance, or they'll take, Medicaid. So that is not a benefit. Even for veterans that are under 70%, it's going to cost you $7,500 a month at Fitzsimmons. So that's just something to understand, that veterans do not get free nursing home coverage. There's still a cost associated with it unless you hit that 70% threshold. But to find out, if you fill out, there's a form 1010 EC, and when that's filled out, they will tell you the amount of copay that you have to pay in these state-run nursing homes. And they call them community living centers now. They changed the name. They're trying to change the whole culture of what nursing home is, and they've done a really great job. But it's far from free, because I do get that question a lot. Well, if he goes to a nursing home, can I go there? If I have to go, can I go with him? Well, you can put in. It's neat. It's based on availability, highest priority first, but it doesn't mean they're going to pay for that. So it's important to understand that distinction. Yes.
Your services, when I served, I lived in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to have been a Colorado veteran to
No, just a current resident. Broomfield wants me to work with Broomfield County residents, only because there's other county service officers, and when we work with them, and if they're entitled to a benefit, it brings money into their county. So, I do see a lot of times people, because Westminster's so close to to Broomfield, and if they're older and they don't they don't want to go all the way down to Golden, then I'll see them. It depends case by case. But normally they want, so if you live in Broomfield County, yeah, it doesn't matter where you served. It just matters that, you're a veteran, and, you have the, paperwork, DD-214 or separation paperwork. Not in Westminster, but he's in Golden, over in the offices over there on Illinois, and his name's Pete Martaro, and he's been doing this a while. He actually came from Nebraska, and he's phenomenal at what he does. And like I said, it depends. If you don't want to go all the way there and you have some questions or whatever, you can make an appointment with me. It's not a big deal. But I know that as far as the county goes, they want me obviously to work with people from the county, just because it brings money into the county, and I have to justify my 2 days a week, hopefully to get more soon. But yeah, so they're all over the place. Mm-hmm.
You have the contact information for other veteran service officers?
Yes, and people call me and they want to know the closest one. Sometimes I get calls from, Denver, Mesa County, all over the place. I just go to the Colorado Department of Military Veterans Affairs website and pull up county service officers, and there's a whole list of them all right there. And so I can pull up the closest one to people and just tell them, you know, here's the contact information. I'll give them a ring. So, any other questions of any type?
Tim?
Yes.
The CLC, I understand it's not funded at the new hospital, so it's going to stay at the old hospital. And this whole idea, it's no longer going to be considered long-term. It's going to be less than long-term care.
There's the short term where people need it for convalescence till they get better.
Right.
There's that as well. But I haven't heard that they're not going to continue to do the long-term care. There are several, there's one in Walsenburg, obviously. There's several in Colorado, the different state-run veterans homes. But I hadn't heard that Fitzsimmons was just going to be short-term care. And but who knows? You never know. It could be the case. Hello.
Well,
All right.
Tim, thank you so much
You bet.
for joining us today.
Thank you.
I would like to give you one of our challenges.
Oh, thank you very much.
And-
I appreciate it.
And please stick around if you have other questions for Tim. He'll certainly be here for a bit longer. We'll probably try and do this again, quarterly.
And if